Welcome, audience. We are again this week with Talk for Pak. Misbah Azam Sahab is here with me in studio. And we have the honor today to talk to Mr. Javed Jabbar, or I should say Senator Javed Jabbar, if we are to go by official protocol. Javed Sahab has a long history and list of services both to Pakistan and, to use the current word Pakistaniat specifically, and we will come back to that word in a minute. I personally, since I was a young man working in media and advertising, the name Javed Jabbar was always something we heard, both as an active and leader in the advertising industry, in communication, later in government. So it is an honor, Javed Sahab, to finally talk to you one-on-one.
My privilege. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And in that regard, I think one of the major reasons we are talking today, and which finally brought us to close this loop that needed to be closed, was your new book, which includes the word Pakistaniat in its title. And it's a concept we've all thought about, struggled with, and owned at various times. So we will get into that discussion in a little bit. But before we go there, I'd like Misbah Sahab to chime in with his experiences with
actually, you guys were not born that time. It is early 70s, middle 70s, Senator Javed Jabbar used to have a PTV current affair English show those days.
That phase I missed.
And that show, I remember my dad, even some of my teachers used to tell us to learn English by watching that show. And we did not understand what he's talking, but of course we enjoy learning English from him. Senator Jabbar used to be, those days, even after that also, he was some kind of symbol of modernization, at least the way when I was growing up. And it is, I feel really honored today to sitting with him, and I'm really thankful to Faraz Darwish that he made contact with him, and now we are on board. So you can start with Senator Jabbar, ask questions.
So let's start with that. I guess, Javed Sahab, I would like to start with, and most importantly, because I think it's an important thing to discuss, your book. You are now advocating or reminding us of that concept of Pakistaniat, which we've all thought about for a while. Professor Adil Najam used to run a blog that captured a lot of those essences, and I had the honor to contribute a few things to it. And now I guess the next step is to take a more serious, more robust, more academic look at the concept. So I would like you to maybe start with that concept of what is Pakistaniat to you, and how did that bring you to write this book, and why now?
Thank you, Sabahat sir, for your very kind introduction, and I'd also like to thank Faraz sahab and Misbah sahab for their very gracious remarks. It's a pleasure to share some thoughts with you. I came to the conclusion some time ago, especially when writing one of my previous books, looking at the origins of Pakistan, which make it the most uniquely created nation-state in world history. How do a people living in this uniquely created nation-state develop a sense of solidarity or communality? And when we look at the nature of nations, what struck me was the contrast between historical identities, which have not needed any special articulation, because they've grown over centuries: the Chinese, the Iranian, the Turkish, the Egyptian, the Russian. Now these are identities that have remained continuous, changing as time goes by. Identities change, but their basic elements were in place. Unlike Pakistani identity, even though the territory on which Pakistan now exists has been the same throughout history, and for about 800 to 900 years out of 7,000 years of history was the only time when non-indigenous factors of force emanating from New Delhi or east of Pakistan ever directly ruled what is now Pakistan. So one can say that there is a historical basis for this. But the very word Pakistan was not invented till 1933. Whereas words like China or Egypt or Russia or Turkey or Iran, Persia, have been in existence for thousands of years. And the age of a name gives identity a certain resonance, a certain clarity and strength. And here is a word like Pakistan, so tender, so new, so infant, that it never even gets used in the resolution which is now called the Pakistan Resolution. The Lahore Resolution is adopted 7 years after the invention of this name, but it doesn't bother to mention Pakistan. The founder of Pakistan doesn't use the word Pakistan till after the adoption of that resolution. To the best of my knowledge, the man who we rightly regard as the poet-philosopher of Pakistan, Allama Iqbal, never really got around to using the word Pakistan, even though he remained alive for 5 years after the invention of the word. So, the uniqueness of the very name, the emergence of identity, and then within 7 years, it becomes a popular slogan of irresistible force. And then in the next 24 years, it manages to become a rallying point, even for Bengalis living in East Pakistan. The majority of people, incidentally, in East Pakistan did not vote in 1971, the infamous tragic turning point in history. When you look at the election data, it's remarkable how the voter turnout in East Pakistan was lower than the voter turnout in Punjab and Sindh. And due to, of course, a variety of factors, we lost the original Pakistan in 1971. But look at this other paradox. We are the only nation state in history where the majority of the people, 52% in East Pakistan, reject the name of Pakistan. Not because they didn't believe in Muslim nationalism, they rejected the state structure of Pakistan. They rejected the name of Pakistan. And the minority preserves this beautiful name and rebuilds it over the last 44 years. What an incredible process. And we will be at work on this for the next, as I have mentioned elsewhere, 70 years, 700 years, until possibly we become an ethnically homogeneous nation. Like the Chinese, 80% of the Chinese are Han Chinese. But there is no such thing as an ethnic Pakistani nation. And there is no such thing as a linguist Pakistani nation, even though Urdu is our national language. It is the mother tongue of less than 10% of the people of Pakistan. So, in so many ways, the evolution of what distinguishes us as Pakistanis from Indians or Iranians or Turks or Afghans requires some reflection. And that is what motivated me to set my thoughts down on paper and identify 30 positive elements and also 11 negative elements, and also say how those negative elements could possibly be addressed. But this composite of 41 elements, in my humble opinion, is offered for deliberation, criticism, analysis, and hopefully of some help.
So how do we provide that feedback? Where do we have this discussion is the next logical question that comes to mind. I know Misbah Azam has a question or two to ask, but where do we have this conversation? Because right now, with all the pull and push, there is the concept, and I'm going to get into controversial area. We have Muhajiriyat coming up, and Punjabiyat is coming back. We have the PTM movement happening. There's challenges to this idea of Pakistaniyat. And I think Misbah Azam had a question.
Actually, the thing is that you kind of said the things. You kind of stole the words I was in my mind. So I should not say stealing, but the thing is, Mr. Senator, you say something about ethnic homogeneity of these countries, like you say China and all other countries around, that there is one nation, and like East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, is also like all Bengalis there. Pakistan is very different, as you very rightly pointed out, and I always ask this question. So the people who support in Pakistan the non-democratic presidential or military type of regimes, don't they know that Pakistan cannot be controlled from one section of the society, because the other parts of the country, other part of the nation will ask the share in power and they would not accept. So democracy should be the only one way to run Pakistan, but people are still opposing it. You meet people, how you see, what is their reason to support such kind of systems?
Thank you for your remarks. I have privilege to do voluntary work across the country. I humbly serve several organizations as either chairman or president, and therefore this gives me an opportunity to travel from Turbat in Balochistan, of Gwadar, of Quetta, to northern Sindh, to the arid regions of Tharparkar, to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, to Dera Ismail Khan, to Multan, to Bhavalpur, to remote parts of Punjab and the north. Therefore, when I submit what I see happening across this country, if there is an assertion of their own local, tribal, provincial identities, this is in no way a negation or a contradiction of the parallel evolution of their affinity with a larger framework of Pakistani identity. It is not seen as a contradiction. It is not seen as a contradiction. It is seen as an assertion of their legitimate rights. And at the same time, there is an almost universal acceptance of the need to preserve the continuity of the state structure of Pakistan without in any way losing the significance of their individual views or interests. Come democracy. Democracy as a process is also widely accepted. And look at the maturity with which the people of Pakistan vote. In over 10 general elections held since 1970, they have always consistently voted for political parties that believe in a federal, single, united, integrated Pakistan. They have never allocated power to parties that call for a parochial, narrow interpretation of nationalism or of religious extremism. Both those elements have been roundly defeated election after election. It was only in the elections of 2002 and 3 when the MMA was allowed political power for one term only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But everywhere else, it is the national democratic forces that have been voted to power. However, democracy is not something that is static and fixed. The forms of democracy should be improved as time progresses. There should be refinements to the electoral system. Our democratic system is not an electorally representative system. It does not represent 50% of the people. For example, because we do not have compulsory voting, as in 23 countries of the world. We do not oblige every adult citizen to contribute an opinion and a view about who will govern for the next 5 years. So that is just one reform that is needed in order to make our democracy truly representative of public opinion. And there are many other reforms also required. For example, the first past the post system, which is in use in Canada, America, Britain, India. In my humble view, it is not the appropriate system. Because in the first past the post system, one out of, say, 5 candidates who gets one vote more than the other 4 candidates becomes the winner, even if the voter turnout is 50%. Whereas we should make it mandatory for a winner to secure minimum 50% plus 1 vote through a second round of voting if such a result doesn't come forth in the first round. So the forces in Pakistan which you say do not recognize democracy, I think are partly discontent with the methodology and the formulations of democracy which produce unrepresentative leadership, also lacking in integrity and accountability. But this is evolving. And due to my constant interactions with the armed forces as a member of the civil-military dialogue group convened by Pilda since 2004, one has the opportunity to learn how the military is thinking. I interact with them at the National Defense University or at other command and staff college interactions. So this is not a military that rejects or refuses to accept the democratic principle. It is probably discontent with the results of elections. Now, that doesn't mean that the military should interfere in the democratic process or the electoral process. I'm strongly opposed to that. But they are also Pakistanis. They are not an alien army. They are alien armed forces. They share the concern felt for reform and change. So today we are witnessing this tension between institutions and elements of society which want to evolve a process of governance, accountability, transparency, and respect for everyone's domain. The judiciary should not be the one setting up taxes and defining what should be the fees paid by schools, for example, however well-intentioned it may be. The military's intelligence agencies should not be interfering in the political domain unless they are asked to conduct surveillance or gather information that is of vital state security interest. And you remember, the Prime Minister is the reporting authority for the head of ISI. So several reforms need to be conducted, and there will be a period of tension, a period of conflict even, perhaps, but these are inevitable. You see this happening even in mature democracies. Look at what's happening in the United States today. And even not today, look at that book by Steve Cole called Directorate S about Afghanistan. Directorate S refers to a section of ISI, but most of the book spells out how the State Department, the Defense Department, the CIA, and the White House were almost perpetually in a state of conflict on policies needed in Afghanistan. And look at what's happening today in America in 2019. So, democratic structures and institutions are perpetually evolving and graduating to the next level. And in Pakistan, I think we need patience and respect and vision.
Sir, but if I may jump in there, you said two things that to me are kind of contradictory. At one point, I thought I heard you say that nations that to come together, eventually there is a, what was the phrase you used, ethnic homogeneity that happens. And on the other hand, you're saying that, and this is something I passionately believe, that having a sub-identity should not be, contra or in clash with your national identity. In fact, I think my personal opinion, I'd like to hear your feedback on that, is that it is by trying to suppress the sub-identities that we create more problems for the national identity, right? So, but those two things almost seem to be in tension there, that the homogeneity, is that necessary?
Yes, thank you very much. I need to clarify that when I pointed to examples of ethnic homogeneity as exists in China or Turkey or Iran or Egypt, I did not mean that homogeneity is an essential feature of all national identities. It is a prominent feature of historical nation states. But there are five other categories of nation states which I have defined in my book. One is permutated states such as Germany and Italy. One is migrated states such as those created by European colonialism in North and South America, in Australia, in South Africa. Those are migrated states. And then there is states created by the breakup of other states, the Soviet Union, Pakistan, Yugoslavia, Ethiopia, and so on. Then there are states created in the post-colonial phase, where departing colonial powers arbitrarily drew up the frontiers of Jordan, or Iraq, or Kenya, or Ghana,
Nigeria.
So we belong to a sixth category called states created on the basis of religion. Even though we are neither the headquarters of the religion, such as the Vatican, neither did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, nor the first Pope Alex ever stepped foot on the soil of what is now Pakistan, unlike Israel, which at least has a valid claim that its territory or part of its territory was where its prophets came from. It's another matter that is being so brutal against the Palestinians. So we are different from all other religion-created states. We are not like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a tribal state. I know you're getting impatient with my going on.
No, actually, that's okay.
I was interjecting it, and that's why you see he's a little impatient. Right. It's not that. Sir, you mentioned a couple of things also, and I have a little bit clarification on that, like Sabahat had. Once you talk about the Directorate S, I read Directorate S, and all the things you say pretty correctly and all. However, two things here. One thing, you mentioned that in US also military and civil, sometimes they have argument. Yes, sure, they have argument, but they have argument, but the final decision is done by the civilian authorities, not by the military. In Pakistan, probably that is not the case. If I read books like Directorate S, even in the Dr. Graham Allison's book, where although he did not talk about Pakistan, wherever they talk, general concept, when I read any book on politics which talk about Pakistan, you will, if I am not growing up, I did not grow up in Pakistan. Suppose I grow up in US, I did not know about Pakistan. And when I read that book, I would feel that Pakistan is run by the military. To that extent, that foreign policy run by military.
There's no denying that. There's no denying that, Misbah Azam, that in some areas of public policy, the military is a very strong influence, and in some respects it's probably a disproportionate influence. There's no denying that, and there's no need to be apologetic about it. The nature of the creation of Pakistan has made the military from the very beginning a pivotal player. No other country was created with two wings separated by 1,000 miles of hostile territory. So the military had to be one of the forces that bound these two wings together. No other country had to go to war within weeks over Kashmir, while millions of refugees were flooding into the country. No other country was born with two hostile neighbor states, and one, mashallah, which was also a Muslim, which Afghanistan didn't even want to accept the reality of Pakistan. So the military filled a basic congenital need in the very genesis of Pakistan. Unfortunately, I believe that both the ambitions of some military leaders and the failures of our political leadership have combined to allow the military more of a role than it should normally play. And it is up to the political leadership to assert by its integrity, its competence, its vision, and its ability, which can be demonstrated, but that it is not willing to accept an unnatural role for the armed forces. And I think the armed forces will be willing to gradually diminish their extra institutional role. They are not, I think, happy entering into realms which they should not be entering into if the civil political segment fulfill its responsibility.
So, Javed Sahab, I guess, and we are getting very high on time here, so I think I would like you to conclude with telling us, addressing the question I raised earlier, where do we continue this discussion? Where is this discussion happening? How do we, because when you say politicians, what I see missing is the voice of the people. We need more intellectuals in that conversation. Intellectual has become a dirty word not just in the country, but even within families now. You start talking about the deeper questions and everyone hushes you up or dismisses, oh, you're getting too argumentative. So where and how do we have this discussion for A, and B, get us started on that. Just help us conclude this conversation by telling us, okay, when we start the discussion, where do we start?
First of all, we are fortunate to be living in a chapter of human history where we have unprecedented access to media, mass media, both television, radio, cinema, books, by the dozen, by the hundreds. We have access to social media. So the means of communication are no longer can be held up as an excuse, number one. Number two, civil and political society in Pakistan are full of opportunities for open and candid debate, for the intellectual element to pose questions and to challenge, and not to be unduly inhibited by those forces that are traditionally called the establishment. And this is happening. Some of those sections of media and sections of civil and political society that are willing to speak are doing so. And then there is the third, the non-media segment of society. There is also a large segment that is word to mouth, face to face, group communication, social intercourse. So wherever you go in Pakistan, you find a very vibrantly conscious, alive population. So these processes are taking place. I think that the education sector, which needs fundamental radical reform, is not changing at the level it should, especially at higher education levels, where you should have an environment where in universities you should be able to candidly question without being accused of being blasphemous or anti-national or whatever. There should be an atmosphere that permits very candid debate and respect for everyone else, instead of questioning everyone's integrity or national identity. So I think there is scope for hope.
So Javed Sahab, I guess just last very quick question. How does one follow your work and your thoughts on this? Is it website, Twitter, Facebook? Where are you most active?
I have a website that is not unfortunately updated, but there is a lot of painful detail there about what this...
And that website is?
www.javedjabbar, JAVED, JABBAR.net. That's my website. And I stay away from Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, so I'm not available there.
Well,
my books are normally published by Paramount Books in Karachi, but there may be other publishers in the future, and I would look forward to feedback and critiques of whatever I've written. I write Dawn, I write regularly.
In that regard, sir, we look forward to having you on this show more often and on the English and Urdu shows. Thank you very much for your time, and it's an honor to talk to you again, Javed Sahab. Audience, you heard Javed Sahab's thoughts, our thoughts. We can all be reached, me at iFaqeer, either on Medium or Twitter. Misbah Azam Sahab is Misbah Azam PhD at Twitter, and he has his own website. So until next time, take care.